What's up, YouTube? Today I've got a really special deck list for you. Something exciting, something new, and a lot of people have been really excited for this. So let's just jump right into it. I'm talking about a water deck. We are going to be going into Neos, level 3 to Norris, Genesis Aegis. So before I jump into the entire deck, I want to talk about Fragmented Spirits a little bit. So the Fragmented Spirits are the new spirits from the set that on enter let you glimpse 6, and they also create a Spirit Fragment token. So this token might not seem like a lot early, but in a deck like this that really utilizes tokens, this is a really cool card that pushes us a little further into the late game. And also we can crack it to draw a card later, which is really, really nice. Like I said, we're playing Tony level 1, Tony level 2, and we're playing Genesis Aegis to create those obelisks. If you're not familiar with the obelisks, I have them right here. Let's talk about them really fast. So we've got 3 obelisks. We've got Obelisk of Fabrication, Obelisk of Protection, and Obelisk of Armaments. So our main win cons in these decks, as you'll see when we go through it, is creating a ridiculous board state with tons of tokens and just completely overtaking our opponent. Utilizing great swords, but specifically utilizing drones. We've seen some board states with this deck that are absurd, that are filling 2 playmats worth of tokens. So really fun deck. If you like creating a million artificial tokens on the board, this is the deck for you. So Fabrication is going to help us make those drones. Protection keeps us a little healthier, helps us against chip damage, and also just helps keep us alive. And then Armaments, like I said, is going to help us create swords to swing for more damage. Let's finish up that material deck. Some of the flex spots we've got: Nullifying Lantern and Tithe Proclamation. So this can really flex and change to whatever your local meta is, depending on what you need. Tithe Proclamation's in here, helps slow down Rye, helps slow down Merlin. Also, it's a way to use our ridiculous amount of floating memory to draw a card later. So it's pretty solid there. And then we're a water deck, so Nullifying Lantern kind of goes hand in hand when you're playing for Fracture Eyes. Pretty straightforward, helps us fight Erupting and other graveyard-based colored decks. So Bulwark Sword, kind of just become an absolute staple in a lot of Guardian decks and in non-Guardian decks, actually. It's just a 2/2 sword that is a 3/2 sword if you're a Guardian and swings, but you have to pay 2 to do it. Sometimes it's nice to just be able to bring that out, swing for 2, and use those 2 cards in memory to level up. I have GCR, and then the Poor Man's GCR, which is a card you are going to see a lot of moving forward in this game. Backup Charger is a card that we are seeing in tons of decks. It does a very similar thing to GCR. It just costs 3 to do. But if you use this pre-recollection, honestly, it works basically the same way. Also in this deck, we're making tons of drones that are automatons. So you can actually utilize this. And there's also a little bit of spice in the deck that you will see when I go through the list that we can also utilize to draw some cards later. And then lastly, the most exciting cards, we've got Sentinel Fabricator, which is going to help us make automaton drones, which you get to a point in this game where you have so many cards in hand that you just sit back, you let your opponent do what they want to try to do, and then at the end of their turn, you just make a bunch of drones, you make a bunch of swords, and then you utilize those tokens to win the game. Archon Broadsword in this deck gets absolutely out of control, and if your opponent can't answer it, you win the game. And that's pretty much how it goes. It is an absolute haymaker of a card in this deck. We can definitely win the game other ways, but if they don't deal with Archon Broadsword as soon as it hits the board, the game pretty much ends. And then one card that I'm really excited about, and at my locals I got to see the power of against an opponent who was playing a very similar deck to this, my buddy Kyle. Alchemist Scripture was an insane card in this style of deck. It gets to stay on the field and as long as you have 4 or more tokens at the beginning of your end phase, you draw a card into memory. And in this deck, that basically reads draw a card every turn. Super strong. But let's jump into what you guys have all been waiting for, the deck. So, out the gates, I'm going to show you some of the water cards and just some of the spells that are not part of the floating memory package. So the first 3 cards I'm going to talk about are 2 new cards and then Revitalizing Cleanse. So this card plays a ton of water. We end up in situations where we have so many cards in hand, so much resources to work with, utilizing things in our deck, that we can put down so many cards and use Revitalizing Cleanse to gain a heck of a lot of life. But mostly, it lets us continue to draw. Really strong. Cards that replace themselves in this game have tended to overperform quite a bit. Icebound Slam is a card that I've been super excited about, and more than just Guardian, but in Guardian particularly, it is a crazy powerful card that is a 7-drop, but it costs 5 if you're a Guardian. It swings for 3, but on attack, you put the top 5 cards of your deck into the graveyard. Then if there are 5 or more water element cards in your graveyard, it gets +5 damage, so it swings for 8 with no sword. So, and in this deck that plays a heck of a lot of floating memory, this is a way to really load your graveyard up and then level up for free or utilize them however you deem fit. And then a card that is one of my favorite cards from the new set, Cerulean Decree. The Decrees are a really cool new classic card. It's an Imbue fast spell. This is the Water Decree. Has Imbue 3, choose 1. If it was imbued, choose 2. Negate up to 1 target non-attack card activation unless its controller pays 2. So any non-attack card activation, super strong there. Up to 1 target unit's attack gets -3 attack until end of turn. Help against Lorraine's, help against just a Guildus or things pushing at you. Let's slow down the game a little bit and get into your late game engine. And then lastly, draw a card into memory. So I was just talking to you about how cards that replace themselves are so powerful in this game. Here's another one in water. Super strong. We play tons of water cards, very easy to imbue, and it's also another counter that we can use. So those are the starts. I'm just going to show you the spice. Turbocharge. So in this deck, when we make that token, again, it's another token that we can utilize for our late game, utilizing all of our tokens. But if we do have our 1 of Turbocharge, if we do draw it, we can sack it and draw 2 at any point, which is really, really powerful. And honestly, just a great way to recycle and really utilize our material deck and our tokens. Now I'm going to show you guys our domain package. So the new domain, Hub of Innovation, super solid card. It just replaces itself, and that's a common theme that you're going to see in this. So it is a a Guardian Crossroads domain. It just enters, draw a card into memory. Dormant Sacrificial Altar is honestly the same thing to us. We're never really sacrificing an automaton ally and a human ally to put 2 cards into our graveyard. We're just using it for its on-enter, draw a card into your memory. Just replacing themselves, adding more domains, making our obelisks cost less to activate. Really, really strong. And then lastly, in this deck, because we play so much floating memory and there's so much glimpsing on your opponent's side nowadays, Hidden Enclave, which is a really, really cool new domain. At the beginning of each player's recollection phase, that player puts the top card of their deck into their graveyard. Continues our self-mill engine, lets us build up that floating memory, level up, and also add to our domain count. So speaking of floating memory, let's talk about a little bit of it. So in this deck, I'm going to show you guys Fracturize, Storm of Thorns, and Diffusive Block first. Pretty straightforward. You guys have seen these cards in most water decks, specifically any kind of Water Guardian deck. These have been in tons of Water Ally decks. The cards have been around. I'm sure you've played against them or you know them. Fracturize, we got Nullifying Lantern, helps us against Erupting, helps against opponent's swords. I mean, even if we have Dead Regalia, we can Fracturize it and turn it into a fractal that we can use to pay for other cards. So very powerful card, and also floating memory with no class bonus, which is a huge, huge bonus to it. Storm of Thorns is an incredibly powerful card. If damage would be dealt to a unit you control this turn, prevent 1 of that damage. If the damage prevented had a unit as its source, deal 1 damage to that unit. So very strong. It's a floating memory Guardian skill reaction card that we can utilize against Advent of the Stormcaller, against Rye players, as we see more and more Rye popping up since Worlds. Helps prevent a little bit of that damage, or just slow down an opponent's board when they're really trying to Alpha Strike you. And then Diffusive Block, I mean, it just prevents 2 damage. Pretty straightforward. The text that is most important in all of those is that floating memory line. All right, and some more floating memory. Lost in Thought, which is one of my favorite cards in the set as well. This card's got a lot of those for me. So let's talk about Lost in Thought. We play all of this floating memory. This is a fast floating memory that we can pay for free and just put into our graveyard if we need to level up. Always strong to do that. A lot of decks play Exercise Curses and Fast Cure even when they're not going to get the bonus effects from it. But the late game with Lost in Thought is crazy because if we fill up our board with 3, 4, 5 floating memory, we end up in those situations where we have a nice protected board, we're stopping our opponents, we're keeping it clear, and we're sitting on Lost in Thought. We can play it at the end of their turn or in our recollection, cycle 4 or 5 floating memory and draw 4 or 5 new cards. Crazy, crazy card that lets you utilize floating memory into the late game, even when all of your regalia that costs anything is already on the board. So really cool to see a card like that created. I can't wait to see how this card is played through control decks and all decks, but specifically control decks into the future. Really excited for Lost in Thought. And then Stalwart Shieldmate, it can slow down aggressive decks, it can take a hit for you, but mostly it's a floating memory with no class bonus. That's the big thing there. And I even think I have one last one that I missed. Navigate the Streets. So with our domain package, this is really, really powerful. It is a 1-cost floating memory with no class bonus that lets us glimpse for 1 plus X, where X is the amount of domains in play. This is basically our Rise, Scry the Skies. We end up in situations where we're glimpsing for 2, 3, 4, 5 even sometimes. So super powerful card. And sometimes you just want to glimpse for 1 and get this into the yard quickly so that you can level up. Powerful, powerful effect. Dungeon Guide doesn't need much of an introduction. We are a level 3 deck that wants to get to level 3 and get our late game engine online. She does that well, so she's in the deck, auto include. But the moment you've all been waiting for, the reason that we are in Neos, let's talk about some new cards to the game in the Neos element. So this deck plays 3 different Neos cards, all with incredibly powerful effects that play towards our late game. First off, we've got Blade of Creation. So we're able to stall out our opponent. It doesn't matter what kind of board they build. We've got Blade of Creation. We have tons of tokens, and this is a 7 cost with, it costs 1 less for each token. So when we have all these tokens, a lot of times this is a free card or it costs 1 or 2. And it's a 4 attack with cleave. So when we use our Greatsword, we use our Bulwark Sword, anything like that, we're cleaving for 7. We're getting through most things. We're even getting through Tristan Shadows. It's a really, really powerful way to deal with a board state in a hurry and with cleave. So we don't have to play Tidal Sweep or try to make that work because we have access to Blade of Creation. So that's that card. Helps us against the aggressive decks and sometimes helps us get around stealth effects or things like that when we need to hit our opponent for that last bit of damage. But these are the cards that I'm most excited to talk about today. So, Atmos Armor Type Ares. This card, at first look when you read it, you're not really sure what to think. It is a cool card. It costs 3, it's a 1/5, and it brings in 2 shield tokens, right? Atmos shields, which are really, really cool 0/2s that you can, when a Neos unit takes damage, you can tap it and prevent 2 damage, but also you can redirect attacks to it. Super powerful defensive card. It lets us not have to play Song of Frost in this deck, which you can 100% play Song of Frost if you think you need more attack negates, because very powerful effect. But we get to level 3 pretty quick, and if we get this out, we can kind of have that same effect while also adding to our token theme. So with those 2 shields on the field, she is a 3/5, sorry. Powerful body, hard to kill, that also creates 2 tokens. Really, really strong, slows down your opponent's onslaught really well, and honestly just a super cool card. And then lastly, a card that people were very, very excited about, Cordelia. So Cordelia is a 3/4 for 5. Seems like a lot, especially when we've got things like that for 2 in Crux. But on enter, summon 2 automaton drone tokens. Okay, that seems pretty good. So you're telling me she comes in with 5 power with 3 bodies. For 5, that's pretty good numbers. But her class bonus is really where she jumps off the page, and token objects you control have reservable. So in our deck, when Cordelia hits the board, we basically have infinite resources to play cards. It really is crazy how much you can have and how many tokens you can generate with all of the different cards that we utilize out of our material deck. Like, yes, Sentinel Fabricator, and things like that, right? Our domains, utilizing those costs, boom, 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 keep using them to make more tokens, to take over the board. Eventually, we end up with so many tutus on the board that there's just nothing your opponent can do. And Cordelia helps you get there and really adds to your resources. So really powerful card. When she hits the board, she is definitely a must kill for your opponent, or else you just completely bury them in resource advantage. So with that, that is all I have for you for Water Neos Control. So I hope you like it. Sleeve it up, take it to your locals, take it to your regionals. Let me know what you think. There's definitely a lot of different ways to build this. This is currently the way that I'm testing it, and I'm having so much fun playing it. So if you have any ideas, comment below. Let me know what's working for you, and I can't wait to see you guys on the next one. So take it easy. Peace.